I'm just so glad to be together with all of you, and I'm really, truly with my entire heart. Thank you for being here. I'm Ariella Morkowitz, the founding director of SVIVAH. We have wonderful new faces here today. I am so glad that you found your way here. If you feel like it, stay till the end to introduce yourself. I would love to meet you, and I promise not to run off. And if you want, give a little wave in the chat if this is your first time here. 30 seconds about SVIVAH. SVIVAH is all about putting women at the center, discovering and exploring the unique and important Torah that comes from our lived experience. Our goal is always to learn with and from each other, and to do all of this within a community of care. Reading that out loud, that is tonight. We define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you with us and welcome. And we love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds and affiliations, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, and our ways of impacting the world. I want to be clear to everyone that we are recording tonight, but I want to assure you that we always and only record without any participants and without the chat. We are only recording the faces and voices of our educators. We will not be recording your face, your name, and we never, ever, ever share the chat. Our priority is to make sure that you feel comfortable being in this space freely. It's just us here, but we do want to preserve the beautiful Torah and teaching of our educators. So that is what is shown, but that is it. And please also take care of yourself tonight. You know yourself best. If this is too much, if you need to take a walk and come back, please care for you. This gathering is supposed to hold you, not hurt you. So please be gentle with you. A big thank you to the Aviv Foundation and the Covenant Foundation for always helping us learn with and from each other. And I want to give a special thank you to our incredible community partners tonight. We're going to put links to all of these incredible organizations in the chat. And I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. If you don't know their work as I mentioned them, please write them down and commit to learning about them. See what value they can be to you, to your communities, because they do so much, and they are all accessible and available to each of us. Ampersands restorative justice. Restorative justice is something that is still beyond my human comprehension of how it is possible to bring people together in this glorious way. Jewish Women's Archive, our stories, our voices, our history, so that they don't get lost. Life is a Sacred Text is bold and fearless advocacy. You're going to learn all about all of these and our speakers soon. The Hadassah Foundation that funds so many initiatives that keep survivors safe globally and in Israel, among a lot of work that they do. And I apologize because I can't see who's here, but I know and I'm sure that many of the people who actually run, work, start, found all of these organizations are hanging out here with us tonight. So thank you. And please introduce yourselves in the chat and correct me if I'm not representing your organizations and your work well enough. Women's Rabbinic Network, Rabbi Mary Zamor, focusing in this context on sexual misconduct in the reform movement and paving a way forward that is profound. Lilith magazine, lifting up and seeking out and encouraging women to share their voices, including mine. SRE Network, making our community accountable to the Jewish values of safety, respect, and equity. JOFA, challenging the community to do better, to see everyone, and to notice the difference that women's spiritual leadership makes. Sacred Spaces, keeping those we love, our kids, our elders, us, and our spiritual spaces safe. JCADA, doing the day-to-day work of rescuing survivors of domestic violence and prevention. And JWI, Jewish Women International, supporting survivors and piecing their lives back together and calling the world's attention to the betrayal of Israeli women, especially by feminist and survivor movements after October 7th. These are just some of the humans who are doing the work of survivor support every single day. They have been and continue to be our teachers. All of you are bringing community a little bit closer to understanding the experience of victims and survivors, reminding victim survivors that there is a community that cares, that they are not alone, that we have Torah to learn from them and because of them. Lifting up the voices and stories of women, you make our community better. And I encourage you, I cannot encourage you enough to know them and their work and to be so proud to be part of a Jewish community that shows up in this way, truly. I want to start learning from the very wise women who are here tonight. But first, I want to ask each of us to dedicate tonight's learning in merit of healing that is so, so needed. You can add a prayer in the chat, someone's name or initials, but let's use our learning together and coming together tonight as a little bit of a moment of prayer. So if you have someone in mind, please add them or whatever it is that you're holding so that we can hold it with you. And thank you. I want to take a moment to just give a little bit of framing for why we're having this conversation tonight. So on the back end, every Wednesday, we have a SVIVAH team meeting, me and Danya and Aliza and Jordan. And we always ask ourselves, what is our community holding right now? And it won't surprise you to find that it's been a lot lately. Overwhelming even. There's been Iran, Romi Gonen, and then Purim and Minneapolis and Iran again, Arbel Yehud, Michigan and war and London again today, war, Pesach, the Omer, Yom HaShoah, Iran. And yet every single week since the beginning of 2026, that there has been one bullet point on our team agenda that hasn't moved. And it was Epstein. Aliza put it there, and every week we would get to that bullet point and ask each other, what is being done for survivors right now? How are they handling this news? Because there is constant news. Epstein, Cesar Chavez, the Alexander brothers, Romy and Arbel, Swalwell, more Epstein. And almost every time there was news, the perpetrator was the face of the story and not the survivors. The news cycle was all about, what do we do with him? And never, what can we do for them? And I'll be straight with all of you. Sexual abuse and healing are beyond SVIVAH's area of expertise. You will sense that quickly when you hear me continue to talk. And we are grateful daily for the tremendous individuals like our partners who dedicate themselves to this hard, tender, and painful work. And still, we kept finding ourselves coming back to the same questions. How are survivors handling this constant barrage of news of harm doing and the endless focus on the harm doers? And how are we, as a community of women watching this all play out, navigating this too? When there's harm, we also need to show up with care for the experience of survivors rewatching their own trauma play out in the headlines. Or those of us who haven't experienced harm, watching the reactions of others, even to someone else's harm, can cause more trauma to a survivor and leave us all feeling like, how is community responding to something that could happen to any of us? We need to check in on survivors, ask them what they need from us, and we need to affirm our communal values. By that, I mean we need to say out loud as a community that these behaviors are unacceptable, unequivocally, without doubt or pause, that these behaviors defy our communal standards. And I don't think that we should be leaving it as an assumed. We waited week after week for the Jewish community to address that ugly and unmoving bullet point on our agenda and to name it as horrible, and to express concern for the survivors, those within our community, as well as those outside of it. We talk often about the concept of the Jewish community as a kihila ketosha, a divine collective responsible for and to one another. And I'm going to humbly say this may not be our lane, this topic, but we hold ourselves accountable to the women of SVIVAH. And while sexual harm may not be SVIVAH's area of expertise, centering the voices of women most certainly is. Our guiding star at SVIVAH is women at the center of life, of Torah, of community. And every time that we let that bullet point slide on our meeting agenda, we were not centering the lives and needs of women in our community. We know that community has a real and essential role to play in the repair of harm that every single survivor has experienced. Healing starts when we say out loud as a community that this abuse of power is not allowed on our watch. We believe in demanding a world that behaves better, and we do not leave that responsibility on the shoulders of survivors alone. And that's what we're here to do tonight. We're going to learn from the incredible Dr. Guila Benchimol and Dr. Alissa Ackerman-Acklin, who are two of the bravest teachers that I know, because they walk into the darkest places and times in people's lives as advocates and champions for survivors of sexual harm. We're going to reflect on this moment in history with the phenomenal and wise Dr. Judith Rosenbaum, CEO of Jewish Women's Archive. We're going to hear from Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, who possesses more bold clarity in her pinky than I think I could hope to have in a lifetime. And Rabbanit Aliza Sperling, who never, ever forgets survivors, who brings us the Torah we need to learn together to help us understand how to walk through this together. One of the goals tonight is to have the victims, survivors who are among us, and they are among us, feel seen and held. All of the organizations here, all of us here, want to do right by you. We want to be part of undoing the harm that you've experienced. I will speak for myself. I know that I don't always know how to do that, which is why I'm here to learn. And I know I'm not going to make any eye contact, but there are people in this room tonight whom I have disappointed by not showing up with the care that you needed or wanted from me or from SVIVAH. And I'm sorry. Everything about what we do at SVIVAH is about working harder to create that Kehila Kdosha, that community that holds us. And I am committed to learning to do better, and tonight is just part of that learning. We have much, much more to learn and to do as a community, and I am sorry because I know this conversation and learning will not fix evil or heal wounds or chart a clear course of action, but this conversation tonight will do one thing. It will bring us together into a space of listening and learning with some of the most beautifully compassionate educators. I know that some of you have personal stories that would enrage us, and I am sure that something tonight may be too much or not enough or the wrong thing or leave you feeling unseen. And I'm apologizing well in advance because I need you to believe me that the thought of adding more pain or activating you in any way has been enough to terrify us into thinking that we shouldn't be having these conversations at all. Because as much as we want to make things better, we're not always confident that we know exactly how. But we do know that the Jewish community must do better to validate and honor the experiences of survivors. And we know that so many of us that care so deeply but are at a real loss as to what to do in the face of such hurt. We don't have answers, not all of them, but we do have Torah, hard Torah, painful Torah, Torah that holds us and teaches us, and wisdom of teachers that are tremendous, and Torah that teaches us how to hold each other. So again, I'm going to ask for your forgiveness and your understanding to not meet everybody's expectations or needs tonight. But I am confident that we'll at least make sure that SVIVAH is a space where we don't look away, where we know that this conversation is necessary and important, where every survivor in this room should know that we see you, we believe you, and we stand with you. And we believe that the Jewish community has a responsibility to you, a role to play in your healing that deserves much more attention and care. We know so much more is needed. Please take a little comfort in knowing that at least we know this isn't enough, but that this is something. I get to introduce one of my very favorite teachers and the woman who brings so much heart to SVIVAH and the Torah that we learned together, Rabbanit Aliza Sperling. Aliza did not and does not let us forget about the survivors among us ever. Aliza, the way that you teach Torah and the way that you bring us together is the stuff that heals us, that holds us, that helps us understand what we're doing here in the first place. Thank you. And thank you for teaching us at 3 a.m. from Jerusalem. And an enormous thank you also to Jordan Rosensky and Rabbanit Dahlia Davis. You'll meet both of them. Each one of you has held this evening tonight with so much love and tenderness, and it shows. So thank you, Aliza.
Thank you, Ariella, for that beautiful introduction. You really said everything that I wanted to say and a lot more. And thank you for guiding us all toward this evening. As Ariella said, we are not professionals here at SVIVAH in helping survivors. And when we first started thinking about this, it was very intimidating. We didn't know if what we could bring would help or hurt, and we just desperately wanted to do the right thing. We are so grateful to have Guila and Alissa and Judith and Danya and all our partnering organizations here to help us do the work. And we're going to try as much as we can to do it the right way. And we ask your forgiveness if there's something that we do or we don't do that hurts you. Our intention throughout is only for your best and to help you and to be there for you and support you in any way that we can. Um, I am, my name is Aliza Sperling. I'm the Director of Education at SVIVAH. At SVIVAH, our goal is to bring women's experiences and women's Torah to the center, which means that there's so much going on around us. And even even in the Jewish community, there's so much going on around us. And sometimes women's experiences can get put off to the side because of the normative or typical or whatever you want to say experiences of the Jewish community. And what we do is we try to see what women are going through and we try to bring that to the center and focus on it and bring women's Torah to taught by wonderful teachers to address those things that are affecting women. And what we noticed, as Ariella said, is that there's a lot of noise. There's a lot going on in the world in general, in the Jewish community. I live in Israel. There's a lot going on here. Um, but there's also this constant drumbeat of um, sexual abuse and Epstein files. And we noticed that a lot of how it's used is as a cudgel to bring down other people. It's used as a weapon. But where is the space in which we look at these abuses and we say, we need to be there for survivors. Let's focus on survivors. And our incredible teachers today really focus on survivors. And we're so glad to be with them. And we're so glad to have a program where we are focused on survivors. I want to, before I hand it off to our incredible teachers, I just want to look at a piece of text that we read on Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot that's coming up, and that is the book of Ruth. And if you remember, or in the book of Ruth, Naomi, as a leader of the community, she and her husband Elimelech are very wealthy leaders of the community. And then there's a famine in the land of Israel, and they go to the land of Moab. And when they go to the land of Moab, they go to the land of Moab because there's a famine, and they need to provide for themselves. And so they leave their community. And while they're away in the land of Moab, their two sons marry and things seem to be okay. But then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, dies, and her two sons die, and she's left impoverished, and she decides to go back to the land of Israel. And what we're going to look at together right now is what happens when Naomi and her daughter-in-law Ruth, who insists on staying with her, come back to the land of Israel. And I want to look at this text because to me, it's a text about what does community do when they see something that kind of disrupts them a little bit, or they see somebody coming into their midst who is having a difficult time, who needs them. So I'm going to share my document. Okay, Ariella, give me a thumbs up if you can see the document. Okay, great. So this is the end of chapter 1 in Ruth. Um, and it says, the two, Naomi and Ruth, went on until they reached Bethlehem, the land of Israel. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city was astir over them, or in tumult over them, is another translation that I saw. And the women come and they say, Hazot Naomi, is this Naomi? Can this be Naomi? So before we go on, I just want to focus on this verse. They come to Bethlehem, And notice how that's repeated. The two went on until they reached Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, right? If you were an English teacher, you might say, can you write this a little bit differently? You're just repeating things. But they're coming to this new place, and coming into the community is going to cause a lot of disruption, both to the community and to them. They need the community to respond to them and to the situation that they are in. And the community needs to think about what they're going to do with this new disruption to their status quo. And it says in the Hebrew, "Vatehom kol ha'ir alehem," which is really interesting. I never really noticed this word vatehom. Um, the tehom, the whole city was in mihuma, you would say in Hebrew. Um, they didn't know what to do with them, right? Um, they didn't know what to do. It caused them so much disruption, so much, it was jarring to them. And then Midrash on Ruth explains a little bit about what this disruption was, and I'll read it in English. The whole city was astir over them, so it's commenting on this verse. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" The women greeted Naomi, and all the women were astonished. Is this Naomi? Naomi, whose actions are always pleasant, who used to walk around in her jewelry and is now walking barefoot and wearing rags, who used to have red cheeks from good food and drink, and now her face is green from starvation? So the women see Naomi, and they see her again after 10 years, but she's different. And the community has to think about what it is going to do when they see Naomi, and she presents not as somebody who can take care of them, and not as somebody who's doing fine and doesn't need them, but as somebody who is coming with a life experience that was really difficult and that they need to acknowledge. Um, and so they say, can this be Naomi? Now, I want to just stop for a second. I'm going to stop the share 1 minute. Before we go on and we see how Naomi responds, I would like you to put in the chat. And I want to ask you, what was so difficult for these women? What were these, or rather, what were these women feeling when they see Naomi and Ruth? What does the community feel, do you think? Um, what might be going on inside the community as they see Naomi come back into their midst? All right, so I see discomfort, shock, disbelief, right? It's interesting, this disbelief, right? It it, in some ways, could this really have happened? I can't believe this happened. And part of it might also be, I don't know if I believe the story that you're telling me. I don't know what happened to you in Bethlehem for 10 years, right? So I don't know. Should I believe your story? Worry, confusion, yes, concern, right? Oh, I love this person and I don't know what to do. Naomi felt victimized and the women wondered what happened. Yeah, surprised and then thinking it could happen to them. Yes, right. If this could happen to Naomi, then it could happen to any one of us. Uh, oh my goodness, Ellen, I just said that and then I saw that that's exactly what you wrote. If it could happen to Naomi, it could happen to any of us. How their lives could be upended in the same way, a lot of fear. Yes, and she's no longer playing the assigned role that they need her to play, right? That they're used to having her play. So, what are they going to do? And we notice here that we had thought in the beginning of the chapter that the story was really about Naomi and about Ruth. But we see here at the end of the chapter that the story is also about the community, right? They may be thinking, why are Naomi and her daughter-in-law only here? Where are the sons and the husband? What happened to Naomi? Why is she starving? And they're overwhelmed, right? And the question, as you're saying, right, is who's going to step up now to help them? right? There's so much going on here in our community. The Midrash tells other stories that the people were all out because there was a funeral that day, that Boaz's wife had just died. So there are a lot of things that need attention in their community. And now something else is happening, right? Naomi is coming. And maybe the hope is, Naomi, can you just be quiet, right? I've got so much to deal with now. And also, it's activating for me to see you in this space. Makes me think it could happen to any one of us. I don't know what to do. So let's go back and see what happens. Okay, so we are back in the verses. So the women says, "Can this be Naomi?" Right? And I don't know if they say it directly to Naomi or they're someplace else and they're all whispering to each other, "Can this be Naomi?" But they haven't even really had the ability to ask Naomi, "Can this be Naomi?" And Naomi answers them and she says, "Do not call me Naomi." Naomi means pleasantness. So, so she says, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara. Call me bitterness. For Shaddai, God, excuse me, has made my lot very bitter. I went away full, and God has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when God has dealt harshly with me, when Shaddai has brought misfortune upon me?" So Naomi says to the community, I know that you would prefer, or maybe it's so much easier living with the status quo, not actually seeing me. But I want you to actually see me and see what happened to me. Don't call me Naomi because that sees me the way that I was. Call me Mara. Call me bitterness because I went through something really difficult and I need you to acknowledge that. I need you to actually see me. And what's been so interesting and what's so eye-opening for me, speaking to these incredible teachers in the room, is the way in which the first step is to be able to see the person in front of you, to be able to see a survivor, and to be able to listen to them and to hear them, and not to impose what you want upon them, right? Like I right now there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on in the Jewish community, and I'm afraid that if you bring up uh, uh, your experiences, then that will impact me badly, right? Or the rest of us badly, which we're going to interrogate this a little bit because that might be a feeling. But when we start to really dig into this tonight, I think we're going to see that that is not something that we should worry about. Um, who who is this person who is entering into our community? And instead of seeing them as a threat, or instead of seeing the survivor as somebody who we don't want to see, what is a way in which we can actually say, I see you, I see your experiences, and I'm here for you, and I want to be there for you, and I want to help you. And as a Jewish community, we can be there for you. So this is our attempt at SVIVAH to be there for all the survivors, to see what's happening in the news and to say, we see you and we support you and we want to give you love and we want to give you what you need. And that is what tonight is all about. And I am so grateful to our amazing teachers who are here, who are going to lead us. Our first two teachers tonight are Guila Benchimol and Alissa Ackerman-Acklin. And you are going to see their bio in the chat. Um, Guila and Alissa are doing heroic work, being there for survivors and helping the Jewish community and other communities step up to what we need to do. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Aliza. Thank you, Ariella. Thank you, the whole SVIVAH team, for inviting us to this very holy space. And as we see in the chat, This people have been waiting for this. We have been waiting for this, and it is an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you for taking the time tonight, and to my dear friend and colleague Alissa. I am really proud to be here with you now.
Equally as proud and honored to be here with you. I've been looking forward to this and just to be in community with all of you. Just a reminder, I know Ariella said this already, but please take care of yourselves. If you need to step away, that's okay. If you need to turn off your camera, that's okay. If you need to go walk barefoot in the grass, do that. Do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself as we engage in this very, very difficult conversation.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask everybody to take a deep breath after that learning that Rabbanit Aliza gave as we transition into getting into the heart of the matter of the harms that we have been reading about, that we have been following, that we are probably feeling in our bodies. So I'm just going to ask us to just take one big deep breath in together and just let it out. And just to remind yourselves that we are in community right now, and we are among friends, and that we are not alone. So I am in community, I am among friends, and I am not alone. And so Alissa and I are going to talk a little bit about a piece that we wrote. We wrote it at the end of February. I think it came out at the beginning of March, and we'll talk about why that happened. What was the delay? There was a piece of the delay that was ours, and then there was a piece of the delay that we suspect was communal. And we want to talk about that delay because in the chat, some of you have been saying, we've been waiting for this, and SVIVAH are the only ones to be doing this work. And so before we do that, I just want to say a lot of conversation has been happening. I know that I personally have been having tons of one-on-ones and two-on-ones and little groups and email conversations and WhatsApps and texts and actual conversations and Zoom meetings. So it's not that no one's talking about it, but I have not seen a program like this one. And so kol hakavod, kudos to SVIVAH for being brave and for also recognizing the lane and role that they may or may not play. So I want to talk about a piece that Alissa and I wrote as this current wave of the Epstein horrors. It's not a story, it's horrors of the Epstein horrors was being released and was being featured in the media. And this was before some of the more further tumultuous headlines kept coming. So I was in Israel for about 2 months, 2.5 months in the winter. And I was speaking with some colleagues, and I was speaking with some friends, and I was speaking with survivors with this more recent horrific download of materials in the news. And I had said, like, I don't really want to talk about this, but I'm really feeling like horrible. And we were all feeling horrible, and it resonated with everybody. And I said, I want to write about this, but I don't really know what to say. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I don't know what I'm going to get in trouble for saying. And I really don't like to talk about my own personal experiences. And I don't want to make it about that because it's not about that. But there's a piece that is being ignited and hurting me too. And I'm feeling not okay. It would really be important for you to write. And there's going to be anti-Semitic backlash. And I just put that in the back of my head, and I called Alissa literally the night before I got on the plane to come back home. And I said, Alissa, I want to write this. I want to write this with you. And I'm asking you to help me be brave because you are one of the bravest people that I know. And you stand in the arena, if you know Brene Brown's in the arena, you stand in the arena with authenticity, and I need your help. And she said, of course. Alissa, I don't know what you were feeling on your end when I asked you about that. Maybe you want to talk about that, and then we could talk about what we wrote in the piece.
I mean, I too have been feeling this, and we say it in the piece, like in my body as a survivor myself, especially being in this lane, being in this work day in and day out, and experiencing the silence all around me. I was feeling that. At the same time, I am a Jewish woman, but I am not in Jewish community the way that Guila is. And so I feel like I'm a step removed in many ways. And yet at the same time, any time that I have the honor and the privilege of stepping into spaces like this, it just brings me such joy. Even though this is such a difficult topic, to be in community in a place where I don't have one just feels really, really special. And so anytime Guila says, let's write something, the answer is, of course, because you are also very, very brave. And, you know, the work that we do, most of my work has been with harm doers. For 20 years, I've been working with those who perpetrate sexual harm. And most of Guila's work has been working with survivors. And so we push each other. We come to the work from very different places. But so to have the academic piece, the advocacy piece, the survivor piece, we really felt like it was important that our voices were out there talking about this, because we come at it from a space where very, very few people occupy.
And so what did we do? We decided that we had something to say. And we didn't just want to say something, and we didn't just want to say anything. We didn't want to take up space. This wasn't about our voice. It was about the message. And we felt that there were two particular pieces that we wanted to share publicly. The first was, if we were feeling the heaviness, we could imagine that other women and non-binary survivors and all identities of survivors were feeling it too, that Jewish survivors were particularly feeling it, and Jewish women who had done years of work on safety were feeling, where is everyone? Why aren't people talking about this? And so we felt we wanted to name what we were feeling so that other victims and survivors who may be feeling similarly would not feel alone, that they would feel that it is normal what they are feeling, and that they would feel like, here are some words that I cannot tell you, but someone else wrote them. I would like you to understand how I'm feeling. Because there is an inability to articulate some of this pain. And so the first part was for survivors. Alissa, you want to talk about the second piece of message?
Yeah. The second part of the piece was about a message to the community, right? So a lot of the work that Guila and I do, we work in faith communities, both in the Jewish world and outside of the Jewish world, helping leaders come to terms with their own betrayal. When they don't step in, when they look the other way, when they don't do the right thing, when they victim blame, our job is to come in and be their teachers and to gently push them towards accountability. And in that work, we are reminded that it is not just leaders who are responsible, it is also all of us everyday community members that have a responsibility. And we also experience secondary harm, right? And so even, and this is hard to say, but even some of us who are survivors in other instances, we don't step in. I've certainly been guilty of that, right? And so the second part of the piece is how you can step in, how you can be a good ally, how you can be brave, and that's necessary. Sexual abuse is not an individual problem, right? We like to blame it on specific individuals, but if we continue to do that and we don't look collectively at this issue, we are never going to solve it, which is why we wanted a message to be to the community about what we can do.
And like SVIVAH, we really felt that we had an obligation, a responsibility, and a duty to write this piece because we wanted to model how to break silence. It is not easy. We can talk about it as if it's easy. Why aren't they talking about it? It's because it's difficult. And so we wanted to grapple with what might be difficult about this conversation. Some of you already wrote in the chat what is difficult just being here, the fear that we are walking into tonight with. And we wanted to think, what might be difficult for survivors right now, and why might people be silent? And one of the things we talked about was shame. Another thing we talked about was a feeling of guilt by association. If I know or had what to do with the harm doers and the perpetrators, what does that make me? Another thing was simply not knowing what to say. And so we wanted to grapple with that. But one of the things we pushed each other on was this is not 2017, the second iteration of Tarana Burke's Me Too movement, right? This was a different time. But we felt like we were having a lot of similar conversations that we had in Me Too. And we were asking each other, what are the gaps that we can see were not filled from Me Too? Or what is the continued harm from then? What are additional layers? This idea that Me Too didn't work or whatever boberias, I don't know how you say that in English, that's Spanish, ashtuyot, like whatever silliness, some people will say to undermine feminist movements, to undermine movements like Me Too. What were the gaps that we might want to point to? And, that was one of the things that we tried to address in the piece. Alissa, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I do. I see in our notes the concept of faux accountability. And I think that's really important. Like during the Me Too movement, survivors were really left wanting. Yes, there were definitely, people who were bad actors who got fired, who got canceled, but that is not accountability, right? Accountability is a collective thing. It is changing our culture. It's changing the ways that we interact with each other, right? You can remove somebody from a synagogue because they've behaved badly and still have a problem in your synagogue. And that is the major gap that we have seen both during the Me Too movement and since. We're missing this piece. And if we don't address it, we're going to continue to have the same conversations we were having in 2017. And I think that's why so many of us just feel so exhausted by this, right? And, Bessel van der Kolk talks about the body keeps the score. That's why we are feeling it so deeply in our bones, because we're not addressing the communal piece. And again, if we don't do that, if we just cancel people, if we throw them out of our communities, it's a step, but it is not accountability. And we will never see an end to this problem if we don't do that, which is why I've been working with harm doers my whole career. And if you don't go upstream and start where the problem is at, you don't fix the problem. So that's what we really see as the biggest gap. And because of that, survivors are left silenced and not having their needs met.
Alissa, I imagine this because it was me. This was me before I knew you. I imagine that some people may be listening and saying, like, okay, Alissa, you go do that work, but I don't really want to hear about harm doers taking accountability, and I don't know what that would even look like, and I don't want to make space for them in the community. And it's really not their time. Like, leave me alone. I have my own harm to deal with and taking care of those who've been harmed. Could you speak to that a little bit about whose responsibility it is to do that work and whose is it not?
So let's be very clear who it's not. It is not survivors. Right? This is not the job of survivors who have been harmed, who have to step into a space to help harm doers, take accountability. And doing this work, watching this work, it's not for everybody, and that's okay. However, if we don't address the problem with harm doers, right? Let's say we cancel somebody. We just displace the harm to somewhere else, right? And so it has to be the job of someone. That's why I do this work, right? I draw on my own personal experiences, both in and out of the Jewish world. I draw on my expertise. I feel like it's part of the reason why I'm on this planet. And there are other people who do that work. So it's not the job of survivors, but it is the job of community. And it is the job of our leaders to do something about this. right? And that means sometimes walking alongside harm doers. And that is very, very hard for survivors to hear. And I talk about that in individual processes that I run because, Ariella, you talked about this in the opening about, not being able to conceive of the restorative justice work that we do. Some survivors do want conversations with the person who harmed them. They want to understand why. They want their questions answered. They have things that they want to say. And my job, my work with Guila, our job is to get harm doers to a place where they can have those conversations, where they can answer honestly, where they can take the steps to talk about how they will ensure they will never behave this way again. And that doesn't mean that we welcome them back into our communities with open arms and just say, here you are. But it means the community is watching, right? If we take somebody and cancel them and displace them, nobody's got eyes on them. Nobody's paying attention to what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right. But as leaders, as community, we can say, we will welcome you back here under certain conditions, and we are watching you. That's the collective piece. And so I hope that answered your question, Gila. It is never the job of survivors. And I think that's also one of the gaps. We see this a lot with institutional leaders where they are looking to survivors for answers, and that is incredibly problematic. If survivors want to play a role, they absolutely should, be able to do so. They have agency, they have autonomy, but to specifically ask them to carry this burden is absolutely unacceptable.
So thank you for that. I want to dig a little deeper, which is, so the gap that we noticed that is still existing now and we believe leading to further harm. And I think it might be even some of the reason of why we in this room may be feeling heavy and hurt is that those who could have helped people take accountability since the revelations in the Jewish community arose did not do that piece of the work. And so there is a gap where accountability was not held up as a value, but it was talked about, but there was no real understanding of how to do it. And so those of us who've disclosed our harm are still left wanting, because what did we get? What has changed? And in watching this lack of response, this lack of communal conversation when the Epstein story re-arose, we were feeling, yeah, here we are, and here is why we are where we are. The second thing I want to say, and I'm going to talk personally here, because of the way Jewish leadership came up for me and the circles I belong to, I was really afraid to write this piece because of who would read it and how they would read it and will they judge me? And God bless Alissa, because I drove her crazy saying, we have to change this word and we have to lighten this word and we have to soften the tone here. Not because I didn't believe what we were saying, but because I wanted it to be read and understood and for people to be able to see themselves without being too afraid. And that was the first delay. It took me a few days to be okay with the text and to keep saying to Alissa, how about this? How about this? Are you okay? And she said, whatever you need to get this out there, I will agree to.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, I was just going to ask you to.
That's what it means to be survivor-centered and survivor-driven, right? And you didn't drive me crazy, right? I love you. You are my sister. And when you are survivor-centered, not just in your work, but in your world, you listen to the needs of the people around you. And so Gila was telling me something and I needed to listen.
And I'm okay to say that, like, writing this piece broke my heart. And sometimes when I look at where the community is and the gaps, that breaks my heart too. But I don't walk away. I still do the work. And I am not an individual who feels good when I disclose. My friend and colleague, Catherine Robb, coined the term post-disclosure syndrome or something like that. There's two terms that are similar, but what she is talking about is that after the disclosure where you don't actually feel good. And so I don't feel good when I disclose. And I want to say that here for people who may feel like me. And so writing this piece was really, really hard for a number of reasons. But what's fascinating is the responses that we've got. So there were men that said, like, the language here was very helpful to me. I needed to understand that language. Survivors who said, I couldn't say this, but it's what I needed to say. Leaders who said, I didn't get this piece. This is the piece I needed. And Jewish women who said, thank you for grappling with the conflicts of publicly speaking about this and the anti-Semitic backlash potentially. And so those were my personal struggles, and also the wins when you can actually see how your words impact. And so we're going to end with some practical tips. But Alissa, I just want to offer you the opportunity to also share the public delay. Like, there was our delay, but then the communal delay in getting it out. And I know that it's not baked in evidence, but it's our theory. Our theory.
I mean, I don't even know what I want to say about that.
Why did we have to self-publish?
No one would publish it. People didn't even respond. Outlets didn't even respond. And that's not our first, like, that's happened to us several times with the work that we do. But that was particularly hard with this piece because it was so Jewish and because it was so necessary.
Yeah.
And I want to address one comment in the chat before we go to practical tools. The question comes from Rabbi Altman. What about harm doers who don't admit they do harm? That this is the most re-traumatizing thing. We do work with harm doers who can't admit that they have caused harm. That is our work to do. And those individuals should not be allowed to be in community, in the community, if they can't admit to the harm they've done. A lot of that is shame. A lot of that is denial. And, you know, Guila and I have these conversations all the time where I have to say, harm doers are going to harm doer, right? And we see this all the time. And when we see this, it is the responsibility of the community, not of the survivor. It is the responsibility of the community to say, you are not welcome here. That doesn't mean you're canceled. That means we're going to do the accountability work with you. We're going to be your accountability partners. We are going to move you to a place where you can stand in active accountability. But until you can do that, you are not welcome in the community. And I think if we had leaders who could do that, it would be less re-traumatizing for survivors because they would see the community standing with them, which we have not seen.
And there have been times when that accountability is not coming and we say, we cannot work with you because it is clear that you are not interested in doing the work, and you cannot make someone take accountability. You can invite them to do it themselves with support, but you cannot force someone to take accountability. So I hope that answers the question. And I know there were some comments on the Body Keeps the Score author, which we are also aware of, and more on that at another session. So we just want to end with practical tips, and then we're going to turn over to our friend and colleague and wise woman, Judith Rosenbaum. So a few tips. We have a line in the piece that says, what I just said, we can't force people to take active accountability. They must do so on their own, but we can create the conditions for that to happen and to understand our role in accountability too. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. I mean, one thing is SVIVAH is modeling it tonight. Let's have this hard conversation. And the hard conversation cannot rush to solutions. It cannot rush to accountability. It cannot rush to the harm doer. We gotta sit in the muck. It does not feel comfortable, but if you're in it with me, I can get through it. And so we have to sit in the muck and say, what happened here? What was horrible here? How did this even happen? Sometimes we do have to talk about the details in the right forum and with the right supports, but the only way is through. You can't get around it, right? So we've got to get through it. So being here tonight is wonderful. Tonight, after you're at this conversation, can you be brave and share with one other person who might need to hear that this conversation happened? It could be another survivor that you just want to reach out to. It could be a community leader to say, hey, I just want to tell you about this, hopefully what you think is a supportive conversation that we had. Those are two examples. Alissa, I offer you space to also offer some.
mean, I think one thing that I find really helpful is to practice the awareness of how you are feeling, right? Having these conversations can be incredibly triggering, right? For many, many years, I was unaware that when I started feeling triggered, my hands would go numb and my feet would go numb and then my face would go numb. And then all of a sudden, like I was not in my body. And it took years and years of practice of just, Guila started with a breath. What am I feeling in my body? Right. And if I am feeling grounded, I can have this conversation. And if I'm not, I can't. And it's okay to be honest with people about how you are feeling, to say, I can't have this conversation right now, but I do want to have this conversation with you because I care about how you are feeling and I care about your experience. And in order to have those conversations, we have to be grounded. So that's the best advice that I can offer, is to practice that embodied work.
What I love about that, Alissa, is you're inviting people into a very hard conversation about a hard topic without the shame. And I know that was a goal of our article, and it was a goal of tonight. We are not here to shame any person or any institution or any group. We are here to talk about what happens when this happens in our communities and where are survivors in the mix. There are people in this Zoom room tonight on whose shoulder we stand and who could also be the ones giving this conversation. And none of what we're talking about is new in the world, in the Jewish world, or in the feminist world. And so one of my teachers, upon whose shoulders I stand and whose work I admire, is Dr. Judith Rosenbaum. And so, Judith, I would like to ask you to offer us some historical context of what we're talking about and what we have seen over time. And I am so privileged to be with you here. And thank you, Alissa, for engaging in this with me.
Thank you so much, Guila. Thank you both for that really just meaningful and important conversation, and for your article, which I read and reread and keep returning to. So, as Guila said, there has always been sexual violence in Jewish communities, as there has been in all communities. We know all too well that it is often silenced. It's shared in whispers and in private, if at all. And we know that that silence leads to continuing harm for survivors, and it allows harm doers to continue to do harm. And it undermines our ability to address the problem because the scope of the problem remains mysterious and unknown, and we remain isolated from each other. There are so many examples from everyday lives of Jews throughout history. And in some of those cases, there are even models of attempts to address it. So what I wanted to do first tonight is to share a text which undoubtedly represents many thousands of experiences. This is a text that reflects the experience of young working immigrants in the early 20th century. And I will give you a content warning that it's about workplace assault. It's a letter from 1907. From a collection of letters that were part of a Bintel Brief, the advice column that was published in the Jewish Daily Forward, which was then a Yiddish socialist paper in New York City. And I came across this piece when I was searching for voices. As I said, so many have been silenced that we know it's out there, but it's sometimes hard to find them. And as a historian, I try to find those voices so that we can learn from both how what women's experiences were in the past, and the ways that people framed those experiences, the ways people responded to them. And I think in this moment, so much of what we're talking about is that lack of response, this sort of, we don't know how to respond. We see other people not responding. There's kind of this vacuum. And so my hope is that by inviting some historical voices in, we at least have a text to respond to and to learn from in good and bad. So I'm going to share my screen. Hold on a second, if I can find the letter. And I think we're also going to put it in the chat if people want to look at it. And I'm just going to start just by reading this. Move all these things out of the way so I can actually see it well. Okay, this is from 1907. Dear editor, I am one of those unfortunate girls thrown by fate into a dark and dismal shop, and I need your counsel. Along with my parents, sisters, and brothers, I came from Russian Poland, where I had been well educated. But because of the terrible things going on in Russia, we were forced to emigrate to America. I am now 17 years old, but I look younger, and they say I am attractive. A relative talked us into moving to Vineland, New Jersey, and here in this small town, I went to work in a shop. In this shop, there is a foreman who is an exploiter, and he sets prices on the work. He figures it out so that the wages are very low. He insults and reviles the workers. He fires them and then takes them back. And worse than all of this, in spite of the fact that he has a wife and several children, he often allows himself to, quote, have fun with some of the working girls. It was my bad luck to be one of the girls that he tried to make advances to, and woe to any girl who doesn't willingly accept them. Though my few hard-earned dollars mean a lot to my family of 8 souls, I didn't want to accept the foreman's vulgar advances. He started to pick on me, said my work was no good, and when I proved to him he was wrong, he started to shout at me in the vilest language. He insulted me in Yiddish and then in English, so that the American workers could understand too. Then, as if the devil were after me, I ran home. I am left without a job. Can you imagine my circumstances and that of my parents who depend on my earnings? The girls in the shop were very upset over the foreman's vulgarity, but they don't want him to throw them out, so they're afraid to be witnesses against him. What can be done about this? I beg you to answer me. Respectfully, a shop girl. And this was the answer of the advice column. Such a scoundrel should be taught a lesson that could be an example to others. The girl is advised to bring out into the open the whole story about the foreman, because there in the small town, it shouldn't be difficult to have him thrown out of the shop and for her to get her job back. So, what do you notice about this? I want you to put any observations into the chat. I want to say also that I don't know if this was written by an actual survivor, right? We don't know. Often with advice columns, sometimes people write sort of pieces that are composites of other experiences. And I'm not sure, I don't think it matters actually in this case, because in either case, it's important that it was written and it was selected to be included in the advice column. It could have been written by one person, or it could have been written by someone who had heard many of these stories and was familiar with the shape that they take. And, you know, we're seeing all the things that you're seeing. The responsibility to speak up here is placed on the victim. There's an assumption that people would take her seriously. I don't know about you, but when I first read this, I couldn't believe how familiar it sounded. It was so sort of shocking to me that this could be more than 100 years old and feels like it could have been written yesterday. You know, I think there is a few positive pieces we can take from this, which, as I said, that it was written and that it was published. This is an attempt of a communal institution to call attention to the problem and to address it. And that is a really important point, right? That is something that this is an example of the voice being lifted up. And yet the response is unsatisfying. The assumption is that if people knew, they would take action to stop it. But she already said that people know and are too scared to step up and haven't protected her. And the action is left up to her. unless, again, you understand the letter's publication as supporting the girl and telling the story. Um, Interestingly, though, there is no um, shame that's called out. There's no disbelief. We don't know what happened to this particular shop girl. I do know as a historian that the growth of women leaders in the labor movement in this period helped lift up this kind of issue as a major labor issue, as something that unions needed to address and to talk about. And that did lead to the beginnings of change. But again, what we don't see here that is all too common now is disbelief or the accusation that she is causing harm to her community by raising this, that she is airing dirty laundry, that she could potentially be attracting unwanted negative attention to the Jewish community. And I want to address that point because it's come up already several times tonight that that is often one of when we think about what some of the barriers are to having these conversations more openly, to something like this being published, right? Like it's kind of amazing to think that this letter is published in 1907 in a prominent Jewish publication, and Guila and Alissa, that your piece couldn't be published in 2026, right? But I think that that question becomes a real barrier of this moving from this position of fear of how do we address bad behavior and harm caused by Jews in a time of anti-Semitism when we don't want to stoke it further? And what I want to say about that is that I think we need to reframe that question. That's a real fear. I understand that fear. It lives in us. And I think that there's so much recentering that needs to happen in these conversations as we try to center the experiences of survivors and be responsive to them. And that is if our concern really is about trying to address anti-Semitism and prevent it and fight back against it, we need to understand how anti-Semitism works. And to do that, we need to understand how sexual violence and harm works, because that is one of the ways that anti-Semitism is expressed towards Jewish women. Sexual violence is used as a weapon against women, and there's a conflation of Jewish identity and sexual identity in ways that are very harmful. And so we can't really fight anti-Semitism if we don't understand those dynamics. We also presumably care about fighting anti-Semitism because anti-Semitism harms Jews. So if we care about the harm of Jews, we need to be addressing the way that sexual violence plays out in our community and also harms Jews. And finally, the last piece that I want to say is that when we are afraid of what people are going to think of Jews when Jews have done bad things, we need to put ourselves as actors who can do good things at the center. The outcome of recentering women and survivors in this moment is that we can replace the idea that what Jews do is the action of people like Epstein and his cronies, and say instead, what Jews do is what we do. Put ourselves in the spotlight rather than the harm doers, and say that the actions that we want to highlight as what Jewish actions are the actions of justice, of healing, of centering survivors and their voices, and putting ourselves in that way into the center as a way to move ourselves into a different direction. So I'll pause there for now.
Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you for your words and for really giving us some more clarity about this this feeling that we have that we're going to increase anti-Semitism, and just the clarity that you bring to it, I think is really helpful. Thank you. The next piece that we've been talking about how to support survivors. And in this next piece, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg and I have a conversation. Sorry, the fact that it's 4:15 a.m. for me is catching up with me, but please bear with me. We have a conversation about how we can support survivors, not only by calling them and by speaking with them and by taking action in the community, but also economically, how we can support survivors. And we introduced this really wonderful fund that some people in this room have been working on to support survivors. I'm so happy to be here with Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. She has been a fierce advocate for survivors and for helping all of us learn how to live in this world and how to do tshuva, how to repent when needed, and how to give support and comfort to those who need it. Rabbi Danya, if you could introduce yourself for us, please.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. I'm the author of, I guess, a bunch of books by now, but On Repentance and Repair is the one most relevant to this conversation. And my writing home now is at lifeisasacredtext.com.
Wonderful, thank you. And one of the things that you have done besides writing your book is that you, along with a few other people, have started a fund for survivors. And before we get into what the fund is about, I want to talk about the name because it's not a name that you usually see out there. So maybe you could help us understand it.
Sure. It's called the Ashru Fund, and it is based off of a verse in Isaiah 117. Isaiah teaches, Lamdu Heitiv, Darshu Mishpat, Ashru Hamotz, Shiftu Yatom, the Ribu Almana. So learn to do good, devote yourself to justice. Ashru Hamotz, be aid the wronged, it's usually translated, but it's like be strengthen those who are oppressed, those who are harmed, and then uphold the rights of the orphan and defend the cause of the widow. It's really, and for us, this idea of ashru chamotz, ashru, of strengthen, go to bat for, show up for those who are harmed, who are oppressed, who are being squeezed, literally, really spoke to myself, to the wonderful Dr. Guila Benchimol, who's here, to Rachel Faulkner, to the whole group of us who were putting this together. It just felt like it was the right name for this project.
I love the name, and I love that when I looked at some of the commentaries on the verse, they related it to a phrase that we know very well, Yasher Koach.
Yes.
That the Yasher is like Ashru, right? Yasher Koach is kind of like way to go, or I support you, or good job. And here we are told that that people sometimes think that religion is about all the ritual and showing up to synagogue and showing up in a certain way and doing this and doing that. And God says in the voice of the prophet, I don't care about that if you oppress the vulnerable.
It's literally, this chapter is God saying, I don't care about your sacrifices. I don't care about your holidays. I don't care about your official, I don't care about your ritual things. I don't care about the official practices if you're not doing the right thing. And that feels very real and very contemporary to me. The temptation to do the outer practices and to focus on externals and not look at how we're taking care of our people and how we're taking care of everyone and our obligations to those among us that are being harmed and those beyond us that are being harmed. I recognize the temptation, and Isaiah reminds us that our job is, first of all, to interpersonal care.
Yes, and I would say that a lot of us sit and check the news, and it's almost like every other story is a story about the oppression of people who are vulnerable. And I think a lot of us feel like, I wish I could do something, but I don't know what to do.
Something I say a lot is we need all hands on deck, and there's a lot of deck. Everybody's got a job. Everybody has a job. Everybody has a role in this, and not everybody's role is the same. Those who are actively fighting for their lives against the state have a very different role right now than those who have capacities of talent, capacities of skill, capacities of money, capacities of time, right? And everybody's got different capacities. The question of what capacities you might have, and what issues are animating you, and where you feel most activated are real. And then the question of who else is doing that work and where we can each amplify and extend instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. It becomes live.
So when you got together with these other wonderful people to make this fund, you had a certain understanding of what you wanted to do. Or maybe that's not true. Did you have a lot of different ideas of what you might be able to do? And how did you choose this fund and its project?
So, sometimes the work picks you. The silence in the community, the discomfort in the community around Epstein and the horrors that he committed. And I'll say, as somebody who went through the Wexner Field Fellowship, I kind of disaffiliated some number of years ago, but the discomfort and silence about talking about Epstein and talking about Wexner has been live and real. And eventually, a number of us were part of conversations that began to snowball, but hadn't yet come into action. And Rachel Faulkner at some point called me up, having been part of some conversations that were happening on the ground, and said, what if we put together a fund? And I said, yes, yes, let's. And it was just very clear that there were a lot of people who wanted to do something, were very scared because we have created a culture in which speaking out directly has become a professional risk. And there's a lot about rape culture and a lot about power and money to unpack there. They didn't want to put their names on things publicly, but amends and reparations, that's so much of the work. And if we can help survivors of trafficking and sexual violence directly, that's repair. And so instead of asking and waiting and permission and getting other people to do the thing, like, let's create the mechanism for people to show up and help survivors directly with their own resources. And so we have the first $100,000 earmarked to National Survivors Network and World Without Exploitation. National Survivors Network is survivor-run, survivor-led, and World Without Exploitation does a lot of work directly with survivors of Epstein's horrors. And we have a list of other organizations that do extraordinary work. And so after $100,000, we'll figure out what, we're in the process of discernment about what makes sense for next steps.
Wow. Okay. And I want to make sure to think about not only the harm doers, but also their survivors themselves. And I think the fund is a beautiful way in which you've come together to think about the survivors and their needs. How does my giving to the fund, can you kind of frame it for me in a spiritual sense about what is it that I'm doing when I give to the fund?
Maimonides, Rambam, teaches, as I read him, that there are 5 stages of tshuva, of repairing harm. One is acknowledging that harm has happened. Second is beginning to do work to create a world in which that harm isn't going to happen again. And this is on the individual level, but also, I believe, on the communal level, on the social level, on the institutional level, on the national level. And if we as Jews believe that we don't want our community to ever be complicit in this kind of harm again, then we as Jews can be part of the solution and the repair, even if any of us individually were not part of the problem, right? This is a social solutions for social problems. Stage 3 is amends, right? That we do work, we can never undo what it was done, but we can do work to the best of our capacity, sew up the hole in the universe that was created. And giving money to organizations that directly support survivors of trafficking. Saying, you were hurt, here is money for your healing, for your job training, for your housing, for your care, right? For your ability to be paid when you speak about your experiences, right? That's literally amends.
Okay, well, I mean, I really look forward to seeing what the fund can do. But just the very existence of the fund, I think, is such a powerful statement. And I saw it right now, it's at like $35,000 around of the $100,000.
We're at 45 now.
You're
So
at 45 now.
yeah. So
Incredible.
yeah. If please everybody, ashrufund.com. If you have capacity of any kind, $18, $18,000, all of it goes to support people who were harmed horrifically by sexual violence and trafficking.
Is there a possibility to write messages or to honor someone, dedicate the donation?
You can dedicate, you can honor, and if you have something that you'd like to share, that you want to write in the message, we'll figure out a way to publicize if it feels that that's the correct thing to do. So, yeah.
Great, thank you, and Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Aliza and Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, for that. I just want to say that the fund right now is at $46,899.35. And we launched last Monday at 9 a.m. Rachel and Danya and I were on a Zoom, and we pressed the launch and we said the Hashechayanu, and it was just unbelievable. I also want to clarify. We're not talking about the fund, God forbid, to use your participation here as an advertisement for the fund. We're talking about, although if you want to give, please be so moved. We are talking about the fund for two reasons. It is another practical example of how you can help survivors, of how we can center survivors. Because I've been on the board of Survivors Network for Those Abused by Priests for 7 years. And one of the things I see in the Jewish world and in the secular world and in the Christian world is that direct support to survivors does not happen. It is underfunded. It is unreliable. There are tons and tons of gaps that others in this space could speak about. And many of the Jewish responses to sexual harm have been institutional and organizational, and it has forgotten about survivors. To SVIVAH's credit, years ago, when they started a Restorative Torah series for survivors, it was because they said, we know we're not the ones that should do this, but no one else is doing it. So they were the people that stood up when there were not a lot of people around. And so I just want to take 2 more minutes with Judith and Alissa, with your permission, and then we're going to get into something where you can all contribute. But I just want to speak to Judith and Alissa for a minute, which is to say, you've heard each other, you got to meet each other, which I'm so happy about, but you've heard each other. And we've heard Rabbi Danya, and I want to ask you both, what are your thoughts on what was shared tonight? But Judith, I want to start with you, because if you feel comfortable sharing, I was so moved, and I wanted to just give you a hug and stand up and clap when I heard what you did for Purim. And that is another way to stand up. For me, the fund was a way to say, I don't care what anybody else is doing. I want to be among the people that are counted and said, I tried to do something. When I'm no longer on this earth, I want to be remembered that I tried to do something. And so, Judith, you did something that I don't know if I would be brave. So if you want to just tell us about it and how that felt and how you could be supported.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say I feel sort of silly, but I appreciate that you've helped me own what I did and recognize. I think what I've learned from it is just that there are so many little ways every day that we can speak up. And sometimes I think we get paralyzed because we think we have to wait until we have some like big grand action to take and we've mobilized tons of people to do it with us. But actually, the little things can also make a difference and can open up the possibility for other people too. And for me, what happened was that Purim was coming and I was feeling this sense of just dread. Um, and I was wondering if I was going to be able to go to hear the Megillah reading this year. I belong to a wonderful, wonderful synagogue where actually every year there is programming to acknowledge that there is a story of sexual violence and harm within the story of the Megillah, and that Purim is actually an opportunity to address that. Um, but I think for me, I was just imagining being in synagogue, having the Megillah read, and people making merry around it, and it felt to me like that was just a microcosm of what is happening in the world. That there is this story out there that I was sitting with, like it was a rock in my heart or in my stomach or both. Um, and that like people were like, yeah, yeah, that's bad, and just kind of going about their business, and as if it wasn't sitting there in our paper every day and in our world. And I just I couldn't take it, and I couldn't figure out what to do. And finally, I decided that I was gonna dress as the Epstein files for Purim. And I was a little bit was complicated because there is actually someone named in the Epstein files who belongs to my synagogue. I didn't think he was going to be there, but I also know that my rabbi, who I'm very close with, was carrying a lot and trying to be a pastoral presence for his family and also to everybody else in the congregation. And I didn't want to make her job harder by bringing that out into the open in a different kind of way. But I also felt like I wasn't gonna hide the issue for that reason. So I checked it out to say, like, would this be okay with a couple people to be like, what do you think? Is this too much? Um, and then I made a costume that did involve having to print out a lot of pages. And I also I put a sign on my back to echo that horrible jacket that Melania Trump wore that said, I really don't care, do you? That she wore to, I think, to visit
Detention center.
kids who were locked up in cages. And I wrote, I really don't care about women and girls, do you? And I basically just I read a chapter of the Megillah, but mostly I just walked around and some people were like, what is this? And then when they realized, they were like, oh, and sort of walked away. But a lot of people were like, wow, okay, that's great. And that was helpful. It basically allowed me to be in the space and to feel like the people who were making the connection could make the connection and the people who couldn't go there weren't going to go there. But it like made space for me to feel like I could be in the room as myself, and I hope that it was helpful to at least a few other people.
Well, welcome to the Brave Club, although I suspect you've been brave long before Purim. And I know that when I heard about it, I was like, oh, I gotta call Judith. And then we had the opportunity to meet. And I could see from the reactions in the chat and in the room that people are feeling the same. And Before I just sum up the several ways that we've heard about taking action and giving you all an opportunity to think on your own, Alissa, I want to give you the last word in our conversation here, whether it's about what Danya shared or Judith or your own thoughts on upstanding, which I know is something that you are well versed in and practice. Oh, you're on mute.
6 years. Judith, I just want to say, kol hakavod. When I heard about what you did, I was like jumping and cheering. It's amazing what you did. And somebody said in the chat, and I'll echo this, micro actions are not small things. And so having a conversation with one person is just as brave, right? And that's how we begin to build the muscle of upstanding. Upstanding is really hard. It gets us canceled, right? It gets us thrown out of communities of which we were a part. And standing in that integrity is really, really powerful. But it's not all of our jobs, right? Rabbi Danya said this in her video, right? It's a big deck, right? There's room for all of us. And those of us who are unable to right now, for whatever reason, that is okay. There will be a time when you are ready, and it might be a small conversation with one person. And that is incredibly brave.
Thank you to both of you, and thank you to Rabbi Danya. I'm going to echo Judith in reminding us all that what Jews do is what we do. And what we have learned tonight is that if I am a survivor, I need to just take care of myself. I need to find the helpers. I need to heal. I need to make sure that I am okay. If I am an organization for women, about women, and this is not my lane, I could find the people for whom this is their lane, and I can create amazing supportive programs. I can be a Judith, a real Judith, historical and current, and do the hard things publicly and know that it's not going to land with some people, but for those for whom it lands, it's going to be amazing. I could be an Alissa and say, it's not your job to work with the harm doers, but it's mine. That's my expertise, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to stick with it even when it's hard. But I'm not going to forget about the survivors for whose this is not their job. If you have the ability to write, you could post, and you could do it in ways that feel safe to you. You could come to these programs. You can reach out to a survivor. You could teach Torah through this kind of lens. You could donate to a fund or the fund that we were talking about here, the Ashru Fund. There is so much you can do. And these are just a few opportunities. Thank you again to SVIVAH, and I believe I'm turning it over to Rabbanit Danya.
Thank you so much, Guila and Alissa and Judith. You have taught us so much tonight, and I want to kind of follow up with what Guila just said. If there's so many different things that you can do, and I want to offer one additional thing that perhaps we can add to that list, which is perhaps we can say a tefillah or offer a prayer for the people that we want to hold in our hearts. And whether that's somebody that you know specifically, personally, or just anybody who's gone through any type of suffering like this, that we just want to offer a prayer on their behalf as our community in SVIVAH. So we're gonna put up on the screen a little mishaberach, and as you'll notice in this mishaberach, in this tefillah, there are 2 blanks. So in the first blank, when I pause there, if you have a name in mind of somebody in specific, feel free to say it to yourself. You could say your own name if that's your situation, or you could say somebody that you know, or if you don't know anyone personally, of course, you can say the general public who's suffering, and anyone who might need some support right now. And then the second time I pause, I'd invite you to add some of your own words to the prayer, and those I'd love for you to put in the chat, and I'll read them out loud, and we'll incorporate our own wishes for others into the chat and into the tefillah, into the prayer. Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning. Mishaberach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Moshe Aharon David Shlomo V'Sara Rivka Rachel V'Leah May the Holy One bless our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Moses and Aaron, David and Solomon, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Hu yivarech et, and now you can think of somebody or say their name, or think of everyone that you'd like to hold in your heart. And may God bless. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimaleh rachamim aleha, ulhachlima, ulrafota, ulhachzika, ulhachyota. May the Holy One be filled with mercy for her, to heal her, and to strengthen her, and to enliven her. Vayishlach la mehera refuah shlema min hashemayim, refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, and quickly send her a complete healing from heaven, a healing of the spirit, a healing of the body. And now I invite you to add into the chat anything else you'd like to ask for, and I'll share your responses out loud. Someone to listen to her. Repair of the heart. Strength to survive, the courage to stand tall and fearless. No more shame, for peace. Permission to rest. Someday to overcome the power of stigma, to nurture and feel safe, to rebuild her life. Someday to overcome the stigma and end the abuse of sexual power. Access to healing resources and community, truth, reconciliation, and accountability. And feel free to keep adding these. And then we're going to close this tefillah with the closing words of Hashtabak Allah Bisman Kariv Benomar Amen. May in time soon to come, may all of these prayers be answered. And let us say Amen. And I want to also give us an opportunity before we say goodnight and have a few last announcements for everybody to kind of reflect a little bit on this night. We heard so many brilliant things and so many brave things and so many things that also might be leaving us in a bit of a difficult space because this is such a hard topic. So I want to invite everybody to just close your eyes for a minute. And we're going to take a couple deep breaths together. So we can just inhale together and exhale. And inhale and exhale. And if you'd like, you can put your hands by your heart and just kind of think back through the evening and just see if there's something that you heard tonight that you find to be something really encouraging, something that was so compassionate and beautiful, something that feels comforting. Just something that you feel like this is the piece, this is the statement, this was the moment that I want to hold in my heart, and I want to take it with me to wherever I'm going after I hang up the Zoom. And just hold that with you, whatever those beautiful words were from one of our incredible speakers. And when you have something that you're going to hold on to, I invite you to take one more breath together, and you can gently open your eyes. And if anybody would like to share what that is, you're welcome to put it into the chat. If you want to hold it just for you, that's fine too. But we invite you to take that piece of beautiful wisdom with you. And I'm going to invite Ariella to come back and to close us out.
I am just absolutely beyond grateful to be in community with all of you, our teachers, our partners, the amazing, amazing SVIVAH team. Thank you for reminding us that we can and will be the ones to make sure that community does what it's supposed to. Hold each other, and show up for each other and see each other. I I won't lie, there was a lot of anxiety about this program for me. And taking Gila's words to heart, I sat in that muck, and I just am holding each of you. That's what I'm holding, Dahlia. I'm holding each one of you who showed up tonight. Thank you, with such a full heart, for the wisdom that is in this room, and when I say wisdom, not only from our teachers, but from the lived wisdom that is so deep in this room. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I don't want to say that we'll do this again sometime, but I feel like we will. And I hope that each time we do, it repairs a little stitch for all of us. And yeah, thank you for being here.